All right, y'all, so the first thing that we're gonna need to do is gather our materials for this. So we're gonna need to get a butcher knife, style knife. This is an old hickory. You can pick these things up for anywhere from about $10 to $15. They're good recreations of what a lot of the butcher knives were back in the old days during the long hunters, the mountain men, even into the early days of what we now know as the Old West. You're also gonna need a pencil, a pair of scissors, some scrap leather. You're gonna need nails. These ones I got right here are the 17 gauge by 1 inch. They're wire nails. They're pretty small, they're pretty thin. You don't need anything big. If you don't have these exact nails, any nails will really work. You just want the smaller ones, not the big ones. Brass tacks. This is a variety pack that I picked up off of Amazon for a couple bucks. You can get ones that are all one size. I just wanted to have a variety. And then clamps of some type. These are just utility clamps, and so you're going to need these to keep your rawhide. The only thing I don't have pictured right here is you're also going to need a dog bone bag. So you can go to Walmart, pick those up for about $5, maybe $6 and everything. I highly recommend get the long tube rawhide dog bones. Don't get the ones that actually look like bones that are all folded up. Get the long tube ones. Those are a lot easier to work with. So what you're going to want to do is you're actually going to want to take a couple of the dog bones and you're going to submerge them in a bowl of water and everything. I like to keep like another bowl on top with a little bit of water in it as a weight to hold them down because they do have a tendency to float up. You're going to keep them in water for about 24 hours. After that, they'll be very, very pliable. They'll be almost gummy. So after that, what you're going to do is you're going to take each sheet and you're going to start at a corner and you're going to nail it in. Then you're going to go to the next one, pull it as far as you can, nail that in. So this right here is all the usable rawhide I was able to get out of 2 of the long bones. That gives me 2 very nice sheets and some smaller ones to do some smaller projects with, or also to keep around for repairing gear like frame packs, axe handles, gun stocks, anything like that. And if you're anything like me, for the spirit of the mountain men and the trappers and the long hunters and everybody who would have made a sheath like this out in the field, I had to, of course, hammer it with my hawk. So again, I'd take it, usually in a corner, hammer in, stretch, kind of hold it with the side of my hand, put another one, pop, 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 stretch it, put another one, pop, 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 and I usually go one side, other side, and then start pulling and doing 2 and 2 and 2 and 2. This way you don't have any ripples in the sheets. So next what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take some of these sheets that I want to use off of here. These have been on here already for a good day. You can put your hand on them, feel that they're not damp anymore. If you're unsure, if you're in a cold basement or something like that and you're unsure, you can actually put your lips to them. Your lips are very, very soft skin. It has a better tendency to be able to tell if something has moisture in it versus just being cold. So I'm just going to carefully lift each one of these nails up and get this all off. Got them all pulled up and you'll see that the nails are still in them. You're just going to have to take these out, put them back in your box. What's nice about these is as long as you're halfway decent at hammering and you don't bend your nails up too bad, you can keep reusing these for as many of these kind of sheets as you want. So now you'll find with the 2 sheets that you've gotten, you'll find that one side is kind of rougher than the other. You want that smooth side on the outside. It's going to give you a nice, better finish. Some folks will actually end up using both sheets. This allows your sheath to be a lot stronger and a lot more durable, especially if you're going to be actually using it quite a bit. So that's what we're actually going to do today is we're going to make it a double layer sheath to give it a lot more strength. So you're just going to take your sheet of rawhide right here and you're just going to run what would be your outside edge, your out-facing edge, you're going to run that under some water. Doesn't have to be for long, just long enough to make it pliable again, so that's good. Once you've kind of got this to be a little bit bendy, a little bit more pliable again, you don't want to like crink it really fast, you just want to kind of work it into the shape. You're going to actually lay the knife down around it, about right where your center would be on it. You're just going to press it together over the knife. Try and work it to the best of your ability. And one thing that I like to do is kind of crease it on the edge to kind of help it a little bit. And you can just feel through the rawhide, the back of that spine, and you'll feel it crease to it. You want to make sure when you're doing this that you can almost see through it a little bit, but you want to make sure that you're leaving enough room that you're going to have the ability to either stitch, or what I like to use is the brass pins to pin the outside of this. Once you've done this part, what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and take your clamp. You're going to tighten down your clamp on it. You don't want to go too tight because you want it to be about even. You're just going to let that sit like that until it's dry. This could be anywhere from a couple hours to some people leave it overnight. I recommend at least leaving it overnight myself, but it also depends on your area and how much humidity you got going. Make sure when you let it dry, you let it dry up like this, so that way you don't have like a tabletop or anything forcing these edges down. You want these to stay straight. So it's been about 6 hours. This piece of rawhide that I bent over here and put in place is fully dry now. You can see the knife tucked in there. I like pressure fitting just to the end of the handle right here, so that way it kind of has a nice snap when we're all done. And so now the next part, we're actually going to have to hold it up to the light, and you can see the outline, the silhouette of the knife. We're going to trace about 1 inch around the blade on this bottom part right here. And by doing that, then we're gonna know where to cut this first piece to give ourselves our sheath outline. All right guys, I've gone ahead and drawn out my outline. So now I just need to take the scissors right there and cut it out. You can see I left a triangle cut out right here that I'm gonna cut out. This will make a more traditional belt hold. Traditionally, belts would come in from the back side and pass through here and over the top of the sheath like that. Alrighty, so now we've got the basic sheath cut out. Knife fits in there nice for us. So next step is we're actually going to take that second piece of rawhide. We're going to again wet it like we did the first one and fold it over and clamp it down because we want it to fit over this just as this is. Then we'll follow the silhouette on that from this one, holding it again up to the light, and trace this around it and trim it out so that way they're both even. Now don't be going and throwing away this good rawhide and everything. This is a great size. You can still make something cool like a neck sheath out of it, or like a medicine pouch or anything like that. Or you can cut it into strips and keep it in your possible bag for repairs like we talked about earlier. So don't go throwing this away if you got good sized pieces. Just like before, I went ahead and wet it. Keep in mind which side is rough side, which side is smooth side. You want to keep your rough side on the outside. I'm going to go ahead, take the knife in the sheath, make sure it's where I want it to be. Pitch everything together and fold this on over. Trying to match the ends up right there. That'll make my job way easier later on. What I like to do is pinch right in the center, like right there. When I pinch, then I can kind of crease those edges. And again, you kind of start the second one with your hands, but quite a bit more than the first one because you want it to really match up with the inner sheath. So it's matching up where I want it, which is real nice. Top right here matching pretty close to where I want it to go. So now I just gotta clamp this bad boy. I recommend clamps like these that are flat, long and flat ones. Makes your job a lot easier. You can use a lot of things. I've even seen people just use, or I've read about people just using books, just heavy duty books, and clamping them in the books. I might try that one day to see how it goes, but for now this is the method that I know. There you go, just like that. So I set it right under where that handle's coming down. Keeps everything nice right there. And I don't have to be completely perfect because you are still going to either stitch or pin it to keep it fully in place. And then I take this little small clamp at the end just to kind of pinch this section together. And I'll leave that just like that, so that way it'll dry. Now this second one right here, this outer sheath, because it's wet on both the inside and the outside like that, and it's touching dry rawhide on the inner sheath, it's going to take a little bit longer to dry than the first one did. The first one, you know, didn't take me 24 hours. This one I don't think will take me 24 hours, but I'll probably end up leaving this one all the way overnight, and then I won't probably touch it until late tomorrow morning, or you know, at least noon. I'll check it again. If I can't tell with my hands whether it is wet or if it's just cold, if you're doing this as a wintertime project, I recommend touching it to your lips. Your lips are very, very soft skin, and they can determine whether something's cold or wet a lot easier. So I went ahead and took it out of the clamps. I left the rawhide in the clamps overnight. So now you can see it's a lot thicker of a sheath. Still has that nice shape for the knife. Still kind of locks in there because I still have that pressure fit right here on the handle. If you can see that little divot that comes down to form fit to the shape. So now what we're gonna have to do is hold it up to the light again. And I can kind of see it, but it's gonna be a little hard for you guys to see on the camera. But you're gonna hold it up to the light again and trace the shape of the inner sheath. Here's what I'm talking about. So if you hold it up to the light, you can see the inner sheath underneath, and that line is what we're gonna trace, so that way we cut the outer sheath to match the dimensions of the inner sheath. So I've gone ahead and I've traced out the inner sheath along here. Now there's two ways to go about this next part. I can either leave the inner sheath inside of the outer one and try and cut around it. I find it's actually easier to take the inner sheath back out and then cut the outer one, put it back in, and that way you can kind of trim up the edges if one's a little farther than the other. So now that we have both the inner and outer sheath cut and fit together as such, we're gonna go ahead and take some of our scrap leather pieces, and we're gonna go and trace this outer edge, making a spacer for it. And you want your spacer to be at least 1/2 inch thick around here. So that way when you either sew, or like we're gonna do today, put brass tacks through, you make sure that the tacks grab all 3 pieces. You usually wanna put a leather piece in the center of here, so that way when you draw your knife back out, if you put any pressure on it, you don't cut through your stitches out on this side. So you usually try and put a piece of leather. You can put another maybe 2 folded up piece of rawhide in here, but I've seen it done before as leather, so that's what we're gonna do. Also, if you're wanting fringe, because traditionally there'd be a lot of fringe coming off the side of one of these. If you want any kind of fringe work done, then I would make your piece have a 1/2 inch up, and then however long you want your fringe to be, continue that in your cutout. And so that's what we're going to do today. We're going to do fringe. I have seen it done with people do red felt, so that way they can just have like red fuzzy felt 1 inch out here. That would just be a big piece of felt that would then be 1.5 inches. So that way you have your 1/2 inch on the inside and still 1 inch on the outside. Easiest way I find to do this is I'll actually use a pen instead, but it depends on the leather that you're using. I have a rough outside leather, so pencil's gonna be a little bit harder to see on it. But I'm gonna use a pen. I'm gonna position the sheath to where I know I have at least 1/2 inch running along this edge back over here. This is about the length of fringe that I want on here. So I'm gonna position this, and then I'm gonna just trace this outer edge. So now I have the outside edge traced, and this is all gonna just end up being like strips of fringe. So what I've done now is I've eyeballed in about a 1/2 inch, and I've just drawn another line right here. This will actually be my cut line. Normally if I'm doing a project, I'll just make little X's on this cut line, so that way if I have to stop in the middle of a project and I have to go somewhere, when I come back, at least I know where I need to cut. But like I said, I just eyeballed it. They wouldn't have had back on the frontier measuring sticks that they would have taken out with them or anything like that. Everything probably would have been eyeballed for the most part anyways. So that's how I'm just doing it. It makes it simple, makes it fun. I do apologize. I had my camera go out and I didn't notice it when I was filming. It died on me. So what I ended up doing was, this was that initial line that when we had our sheath sitting here that we traced, I just brought that in a 1/2 inch, and then I just eyeballed a 1/2 inch and I just cut that out, so that way when it's sitting in there, they'll have that 1/2 inch still in there. I'm gonna go ahead and open it up, kind of fit it in to give you an idea of what that's gonna look like. So I give you a bit of an idea right there of what that's gonna look like. Now you'll see in my triangle cutout space there's a little bit of leather. This is why I said to do this, to measure everything and then put it together just to see how it fits. Now I know that I need to mark that and cut that out, so that way I don't have that interfering when I try and wear this on my belt. But that is about the shape of what we're gonna look like so far. Next, I'm going to choose what size of brass tacks I want to use. I think on a sheath like this one, I'm probably going to go with ones that are a little on the smaller side. So one's more akin to like that size right there. So I'm going to eyeball out where I want about each brass tack to end up going and everything. I'm just going to simply flip it over and eyeball about where my center needs to be, so that way I can figure out where I'm supposed to push the pin through. I'll go ahead and take my pencil, I'll mark that up all the way down where I want it, and then I'll show you what that looks like. So as you can see, I went ahead and just eyeballed out a bunch of holes along this edge right here. That's where I'm going to go ahead and put my brass tacks. But you can see even when I have this squished, that this part right here still has a bunch of space. That's expected. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pinch that together, and I'm actually going to end up just stitching right along there and on the outside edge of this triangle. That's going to help reinforce our triangle cutout and keep this tighter together. And we need this reinforced because remember, our belt is going to come through the back side of this and up and around the sheath. That's how it's traditionally held, a little bit tighter to the body and less chance of your knife coming out or anything like that. Last thing that we need to consider is, how is this knife going to be worn? The side that I have these brass tacks on right here would recommend it more on the left side actually being worn as opposed to the right side of the body. Traditionally also, these were worn on the small of the back to be drawn by the dominant hand. So for me, that'd be my right hand. So if this was one of my small of my back, then the belt would come up through the back of here, over the back like that. So I actually need my brass tacks to be shown on this side. So I need to make a mark on this side with my pencil, so that way I know that. Still punch all my holes through, and just remember that this is the side that the head of the tacks need to go on. So I punch my holes through, and remember that it's going to sit on this side facing out. So I punched all my holes through from the back side, and you'll see that there's like little raised indents on the back side. Those are going to get hidden underneath the brass tack because the brass tack itself is conical. So I actually like to have a nice clean line going underneath the brass tacks, just a nice solid color line. I'll probably go with a black line for this sheath. I'm just using painters. You can find these at Walmart, you can find them at any craft supply store. I like these really well. Usually I only gotta do 1, maybe 2 coats on the rawhide and it's pretty good, and they dry within like 10 minutes or so. So I'm just gonna go ahead and do a nice handsome little line over there. So that way when the tacks are put in, it just kind of completes the look. So you see I've got this nice solid handsome line right here. It's going to look real nice with my brass tacks put down in it. But it occurred to me while I was doing this to show you the difference. This top line right here has had 2 coats done on it with the paint pen, versus this bottom one right here, just from here down, only has 1 coat. That gives it more of a matte finish. Personally, I like boom, strong, solid colors, but I wanted to show you guys that because the matte finish looks more aged, and you can actually take some sandpaper to it, very, very fine grit sandpaper, and sand it a little bit to age the look of the sheath if you're looking for that look. All right, so I have my nice, handsome, solid line ready for the tacks. One thing I like to do is also, you see right here at the top, try to fill in the edges best you can. It's not always perfect, but I wanted to stop and show you that. I was trying to fill in that edge, that way when it pinches together it doesn't look as bad. On the back side you'll see that I've so far only traced out where I'm going to paint. That's because when the tacks come through from this side and I bend them to lock down on this side, when I'm painting them, when I'm painting this strip of black, I can actually paint over those metal tack ends and they'll hide in the sheath. They just look a lot more handsome that way, I think, and I think you'll like the look of it a lot better. So now what we're ready to do is we're ready to actually put in our brass tacks. This is the last kind of tricky part to this project, but if you take your time, it'll be no problem for you. So what I'm gonna wanna do is I've got all my tacks out here ready to go. I'm gonna go ahead and take that leather piece that we had cut earlier, and I'm gonna fit it in here. And I'm gonna start at the top with the very first one, and I'm gonna have to take my punch and punch through and then set one tack in. So I'm gonna look at my lines here, try and match that up as well as I can, re-punch through just enough, like about that far, just enough so I can get a brass tack in there, set one tack in like that. Look at that, already starting to look handsome. Now I want to make sure that this kind of stays lined up, at least for a few more holes as I'm doing this. So now I flip it over to the other side. I take a pair of pliers. I'm going to grab, I'll try to get close to the camera so you can see it. I'm going to try and grab right here and fold it over as best as I possibly can. Once I have it folded a little bit, I'm going to pinch between, move my finger there, pinch between the head of the tack and the back end and just close the pliers down on them. And that's going to help set that first one. Like that. Now what you can do is while you're holding tension on these and you've got it all the way down to where it's touching the other one, you can actually bend it or overbend it a little bit if you're careful, and you'll actually take that head and you'll stick it down into the rawhide itself, so that way you're not getting snags coming off of here like on your belt or your clothes or anything like that. So that's bent in, that's not going to snag any at all. So one done, 15 more to go. We'll see how it looks here in a second. So it's coming along. I wanted to show you again how to put one of these in properly. So I'm just going to put it in from this side, right? Now sometimes you have to just force it to pop through, other times you can use your awl. Once it's in on the other side like that, you're going to take your pliers and you're going to pull hard up on it, wiggling it back and forth. That's going to try and seat it on this other side right here really well. You'll get some that don't quite seat all the way. That's normal. It's just how it is using brass tacks. So you pull this all the way up and you're going to slowly try and bend it just a little bit to where it bends about like that. So I'm going to keep track of where the head is on this side. I have to bend this under so I can get my pliers in there. So I bend it under and I take it at an angle going that way, pinching and seat down as hard as I can. And I go to the other side, I check it, make sure it's good, and it is. So that is how I'm seating all of these all the way down. So now that we have all of our brass tacks in, next step we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and cut our fringe real quick. For me, if it's going to be resting like this or if it's going to be resting like this, I actually want the fringe to kind of flow this way. So I'm going to actually cut all my fringe at an angle like that, as opposed to straight up and down. I'll cut it at an angle and we'll see how well that looks. So I started cutting my strips, as you can see right here. You don't want to go too small, otherwise they will pop off really easily and they'll be more fragile. But I forgot that what I want to go ahead and do now is I want to do 3 black stripes across here before I cut all this up. That'll give kind of a primitive camouflage pattern to the lacing itself. So Now that I flipped over my sheath, I've got all my brass tacks in. I'm just gonna take just a little bit of super glue, this Gorilla super glue. I'm just gonna put a dab on the very top of each of these. I'm also, when I put the sealant on, this will also help keep these brass tacks in place and keep them down. It doesn't have to be perfect because, like I said, you're gonna actually like end up, you know, painting and sealing over these. But this is just an added benefit to try and keep these brass tacks in place. All right, my 3 breakup bands are on there. Let's go ahead and cut this fringe. Fringe is all cut. Now these paint lines right here will fade over time, but when that's hanging on the small of your back and everything and you're walking, it's moving, it does actually help to break up your pattern a bit. So next what we're gonna do is, you can see I still have kind of a bit of space right here that needs to be closed up. That's because I still need to put a stitch around that outer triangle right there. Then after that, I'll take a piece of sandpaper and I'll sand the inside of that so that way it doesn't catch on a belt or anything like that. So let's go ahead and do that stitch around there. I poked my holes all the way around, making sure that they're going all the way through all 4 layers. Now, I just used my awl for that. And now I'm just gonna use some probably carpet thread. Use what you have laying around the house, but do a saddle stitch around here. The saddle stitch, I used wax thread on this. Now you'll see on the back side right here, I've got, you know, a little end sticking up. That's not a problem at all because when we go ahead and put our finishing coverage on here and everything, that's going to seal that down, and so we're not going to have that issue. So now I need to sand the inside of our triangle cutout. Access to any sandpaper, but you do have access to a bastard file. This will actually work really well. Rawhide doesn't take a lot to actually sand out, so you just sit there with. Now one nice thing is the round side of this gets in those corners really nice. All right, nicely done. That is nice and smooth for us. Yeah, much nicer. Now at this point you can also take your file to the very top, right along this edge if you want to smooth that out. It doesn't take very long. I like to use the flat side, obviously, of the file, but this is kind of nice. It makes it a little bit softer, so you don't risk like cutting your hand or anything like that if you're drawing the knife very quick. Also just has kind of a more weathered age look. You'll see it kind of get a little furry towards the top and everything. You can actually wet that and push it back down if you want, but that makes that a lot softer, a lot nicer. So now's the fun part. Now's my favorite part. I get to go ahead and take a pencil and I get to draw on the outward facing side a design and paint that design. Again, you can use painter markers. Those are what I'm using. You can find these at any craft store or Walmart's or anything like that, or you can use traditional paints if you really want to. You can use pigment paints such as that. You can use oil paints. I wouldn't use watercolor paints. I would, if you're going to use actual paint, use oil paints or oil-based paints. On the reverse, some people like to go completely blackout, some people like a line. I like to just kind of leave it bare anyways. So that way you don't have it kind of wearing off over time or anything like that. But I usually will fill this in black. On in pencil, the design I want to do. So now we're going to paint it up. When you're painting, what I've found is you end up filling in all your color spots first, and then you come back and trace out in the black. That makes a much more crisp look to your artwork. So I've gone ahead and done the painting that I wanted to do on the sheath. All the colors are 2 coats, all the black is 3 coats. I went ahead and tried to do what I could up here on the edges. Same thing with along the edges on this back side, on up, and right here on the front side. On the back side, I just continued this and it painted over the top of the back side of the rivets. I just think it looks a lot better that way, and just continued this pattern from the top all the way around. So now it's time for me to go ahead and seal this sheath. The sheath itself is done. Very happy about that, but it's time to seal it. So I'm gonna actually take the knife out of the sheath for this. I find it's just an easier process. Make sure my fringe isn't in the way, nothing's touching the sheath. So I recommend putting down doubled over paper towel on any surface you're going to do this with. It's more of a precaution than anything. I don't actually find that this gets too messy, but it's just precaution, like I said. The brush I'm using, this is a Purdy. I like Purdy's and everything. Probably some of the best bristles as far as any kind of painting or coating that you're going to put on. Also, their covers, they come with a really nice cover. And so if you take care of it and you rinse it out real good after you're done using it, this cover is reusable. It's got Velcro on it, and it'll help keep the shape of the brush for many more projects to come. So what I'm going to go ahead and use is this Minwax polyacrylic protective finish. I like this one better for doing these. I find that it actually does waterproof it quite well and adds a lot more rigidity to our already rigid sheath, which is nice. I don't think I would go ahead and use this on straight leather products, but for our purposes here, this is the one that I would go with. Go ahead and shake it up real good. So it's going to look non-clear. I promise you that this does dry clear. It did on my other sheath, it did on the testers before. If you're unsure, whenever you end up staking out a bunch more of your rawhide and everything, you're gonna have small pieces. Even after you cut this off, small pieces, you can always save those and use those as testers, either with the color of the paints of what they're gonna look like when they're dry, or what this ends up looking like when it's dry if you're unsure and you wanna be extra cautious. So now what I'm gonna do is just get a little bit on my brush here. I like to start from the bottom up, that's just me. And I try and use the end of the brush to kind of go in between the rivets, because I don't really want the rivets coated, but that's a personal choice. You can coat them really, I mean, it's not going to hurt them at all. Yeah, I'm just going to kind of run it all going with the sheath itself. I don't really find I get a lot of like weird dry lines or anything, but it's just the way that I prefer to do it. So I'm going to coat this all the way on one side one time. About 20 minutes is going to be my wait time before it'll be dry enough to do a second coat. Test it. If it's super tacky to the touch, don't put any more on. But this isn't a sealer that you really need to wait like 24 hours or even an hour between coatings. Honestly, when I did my other sheath this way, all I did was do it while I was watching Netflix with my wife. We just ended up putting something on, and about every random stopping point in the show, whenever there was a lull or something like that, I'd get up real quick, go to the counter, slap on another coat, and then go back to the show. And within 2 episodes, my sheath was pretty well done. I didn't find I got any streaks when this dried. You do want to be careful though that you're not adding too much pressure. I'll actually pick this up carefully and show you. I don't know if you can see it on the camera. So if I add too much pressure, it will start to pick up some of the paint. You can kind of see it right there. It's picking up and pulling that way. So if you see that, just stop, let it dry, let it do its thing. So I'm gonna let that dry for about 20 more minutes or so. Then I'm gonna flip it over, hit the other side. I'm gonna keep going back and forth until I have 3 solid coats on either side. 3 coats is plenty for waterproofing, plenty for rigidity, and it will protect your sheath. All right, so I'm dry to the touch on the front side, so now I'm gonna flip it over on the back. I'm gonna do the back side, do my first coat on that. Again, personal preference, but since I started from the bottom going up on the front side, I'm actually gonna do that on the back side. It's personal preference, so you can do it your own way. So while I'm doing on this back side, I'm just gonna remind you that it's gonna take 3 coats on either side for you to get this exactly right. And you will get kind of a satin look, a slight sheen right there. So our knife sheath is now completely done. It's got 3 coats on both sides, slight protective sheen on it, nice hard case. All the fringe is done. You can see that on the back, all of the brass pins have been folded over, glued, colored, glued again over. That's all good. Inside, good to go. Double layer. So this is now completely done. All right, y'all, so that's how I went ahead and made this sheath right here. Obviously, the knife is your choice. I went with a more traditional butcher knife style knife. That's kind of what I wanted to get out of this project. Use whatever blade you want. This really works for all types of blades. If you have ones that have guards, just instead of doing this kind of design, just know that your sheath needs to stop right where your guard meets it. Otherwise, it should work fine. I want to say thank you very much for sticking around to the end of this video, for watching it. Hopefully you learned something. If you liked it, please like the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel, go check out our blog, and give us a like on Instagram or a follow. Anyways, have a good day, and I'll see you around.